Gilgamesh. 2/3 god, 1/3 human, not half 2/3. That fraction is unique in the entire ancient world. No other demigod in any mythology was described with that specific ratio. Gilgamesh was 2/3 god from his mother, the goddess Ninsun, and 1/3 human from his father, the former king of Uruk, Lugalbanda. He was the king of Uruk. He built its walls. He was real. Scholars mostly agree a historical king named Gilgamesh actually existed, ruling somewhere between 2900 and 2350 BCE. Then the myths absorbed him. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest piece of epic literature in the world, older than Homer by at least 500 years. And its hero is not a simple warrior. He is a man who does everything right as a king and still loses what he most wants. He killed Humbaba the forest demon. He defeated the bull of heaven. He was the strongest person alive. Then his best friend Enkidu died. And Gilgamesh, who had conquered everything, could not conquer that. He spent the rest of the epic searching for immortality. He found it once, a plant at the bottom of the ocean that could restore youth. He dove for it. He retrieved it. He set it down while he bathed. A serpent ate it. 2/3 divine, strong enough to do anything. Not strong enough to hold on to the one thing that mattered. The oldest hero in the world failed the same way everyone fails. He got distracted for a moment, and the moment cost him everything. Heracles. He killed his wife and children. That is where the 12 labors come from. Not glory, not heroism. Madness sent by Hera, wife of his father Zeus, who had never forgiven Zeus for producing a son with another woman. Heracles was the son of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene. Zeus appeared to Alcmene disguised as her husband. The deception produced the greatest hero in Greek mythology. Hera never forgot the insult. She drove Heracles mad. In the grip of that madness, he killed his own family. When the madness cleared and he understood what he had done, he went to the oracle at Delphi to ask what penance could possibly be enough. The oracle sent him to Eurystheus, king of Mycenae, 12 labors, the Nemean lion, the Lernaean hydra, the Erymanthian boar, the Augean stables, the Stymphalian birds, the Cretan bull, the mares of Diomedes, the belt of Hippolyta, the cattle of Geryon, the apples of the Hesperides. Cerberus he completed all 12, then he died. His second wife, Deianira, unknowingly poisoned his tunic with what she believed was a love potion. The centaur Nessus had given it to her before Heracles killed him, and Nessus knew exactly what it was: burning, unbearable. Heracles threw himself onto a funeral pyre rather than endure it. Zeus took him to Olympus and made him a god. He earned divinity by suffering more than any god ever had to suffer. The half-god became fully divine. It cost him everything he had loved: Achilles. His mother held him by the heel. Thetis, a sea nymph, dipped her infant son in the river Styx to make him invulnerable. She held him by the heel. The heel never touched the water. Achilles was the greatest warrior of the Trojan War. No one could wound him. No spear could penetrate. No sword could cut. He was effectively immortal in battle, except for the one spot she had held him by. His mother knew he would die at Troy. She disguised him as a girl on the island of Scyros to keep him from going. Odysseus found him. He went. He killed Hector, the greatest Trojan warrior, and dragged his body around the walls of Troy behind his chariot for 12 days. Then Paris shot him in the heel. Apollo guided the arrow. The most invulnerable warrior who ever lived had one vulnerability, and the gods made sure the arrow found it. In Homer's Iliad, Achilles is given a choice before he ever reaches Troy. His mother tells him, "Stay home and live long, or go to war and die young but be remembered forever." He chose glory. He got it. His name has been spoken every single day for 3,000 years. The heel was not a mistake. It was the price of the bargain. You cannot be both fully immortal and fully present in the human world. Achilles chose presence. The heel was what it cost Arjuna. He put down his bow in the middle of the battlefield. The armies were assembled, thousands of warriors on each side, ready to fight. Arjuna, the greatest archer in the world, looked across at the opposing army and saw his cousins, his teachers, his friends, his family. He sat down in his chariot and refused to fight. Arjuna was the son of Indra, king of the gods, and the mortal woman Kunti. He possessed divine weapons. He could call lightning. He had been trained by gods directly. He was arguably the greatest warrior in Indian mythology. And in the most important moment of his life, he stopped. What follows is the Bhagavad Gita. His charioteer, who turns out to be the god Krishna in disguise, speaks to him for 18 chapters about duty, action, the nature of the self, and why a warrior must fight even when fighting is terrible. It is one of the most important philosophical texts in human history, and it begins with a demigod having a breakdown before a battle. Arjuna eventually picks up his bow. The Mahabharata war happens, almost everyone dies. But the Bhagavad Gita exists because a half-divine warrior sat down in his chariot and asked, "Why should I fight?" The son of the king of the gods. And the question that produced the answer is the most human question imaginable. Perseus. He had nothing, no sword, no shield, no map, no idea where to go. He had been sent to kill Medusa by a king who expected him to die trying, which was the point. King Polydectes wanted Perseus dead so he could take his mother. Perseus was the son of Zeus and the mortal Danae. Zeus came to her as a shower of gold while she was imprisoned in a bronze tower by her father, who had been told by an oracle that his grandson would kill him. The oracle was right. Perseus eventually killed his grandfather by accident, with a discus throw at an athletic competition. But first, Medusa. The gods helped him. Athena gave him a mirrored shield. Hermes gave him winged sandals and a sword. The Grae, 3 witches who shared one eye and one tooth between them, were forced to give him directions after he stole their eye mid-handoff. He cut off Medusa's head without looking at her directly. Pegasus sprang from her blood. He used her severed head to turn his enemies to stone several more times before giving it to Athena for her shield. Perseus is the template, the hero without resources who gathers tools and allies and completes the impossible task. Every hero story that follows, every fantasy novel, every action film, has Perseus somewhere in its ancestry. He did not start with advantages. He accumulated them. That is the actual lesson, Chulainn. When he was 7 years old, he killed a guard dog the size of a wolf with his bare hands and a hurling ball. The dog belonged to the smith Chulainn. As compensation, the boy offered to guard Chulainn's home himself until a new dog could be trained. This is where he got his name, Chulainn, the Hound of Chulainn. He was the son of Lu, the sun god and the mortal Dectyr. He was the greatest warrior in Irish mythology and the central hero of the Ulster cycle, a series of tales preserved in manuscripts from the 12th century CE but rooted in oral tradition centuries older. His primary power was the riastrat, the warp spasm. When it took him, his body inverted. One eye sank into his skull, the other bulged out, his muscles rearranged themselves. His jaw extended to his chest. A column of dark blood erupted from the top of his head. He became something that was not human and could not be fought. He died young. He knew he would die young. Before his final battle, a series of jasa, sacred prohibitions, were deliberately violated by his enemies to weaken him. He was lured into eating dog meat, which broke the prohibition against it, because his name meant hound and eating one was forbidden to him. He fought anyway. Wounded, weakened, he tied himself to a standing stone so he would die upright rather than fall. His enemies waited until a raven landed on his shoulder to confirm he was dead before they approached. The raven, not a weapon, not a warrior. A bird landing on his shoulder was the only signal they trusted. Maui. He fished up an island. With a fish hook made from his grandmother's jawbone, Maui cast his line into the ocean and pulled. What came up was the North Island of New Zealand, Te Ika Maui, the fish of Maui. Maui is the demigod trickster of Polynesian mythology, present across Hawaiian, Maori, Samoan, and Tongan traditions with variations in each. His father was the god Makatutara. His mother was the mortal Taranga. He was born premature and thrown into the sea wrapped in a topknot of his mother's hair. He survived. He slowed the sun. The days were too short. Crops could not grow. People could not complete their work. Maui wove ropes from his sister's hair and lassoed the sun as it rose, beating it until it agreed to move more slowly across the sky. He stole fire from the underworld and gave it to humans. He tried to grant humanity immortality by crawling into the body of the goddess of death, Nui Te Po, while she slept. If he could pass through her and emerge from her mouth, humans would live forever. A fantail bird laughed at the sight. Nui Te Po woke. She crushed him. The demigod who had done everything, who had fished up islands, lassoed the sun, stolen fire, could not defeat death. But he slowed the sun down for us. The days are long because of him. He died trying to make us immortal. The least we can do is remember how long the days are. Ashoka, the hidden one. Not all demigods are warriors. In some Hindu traditions, the monkey god Hanuman was born of the wind god Vayu and the Apsara Anjana. He is technically a demigod, but his divinity manifests not as strength alone, though he has strength enough to carry a mountain, but as devotion. He is the greatest devotee of Rama in all of Hindu mythology. His power is directly proportional to his devotion. The more completely he focuses on Rama, the stronger he becomes. There is a story where the gods ask Hanuman to prove his devotion. He tears open his chest. Inside his chest, Rama and Sita, sitting in his heart. He is the demigod who contains a god inside him. His father is wind. He can fly. He can change his size from the size of a thumb to the size of a mountain. He carried an entire mountain from the Himalayas because he could not identify the specific medicinal herb needed to save Lakshmana's life, so he brought the entire mountain rather than guess wrong. This is the specific detail that has always struck me. He could not identify the herb, so he brought the mountain. The most powerful devotee in Hindu mythology solved the problem not with divine knowledge, but with the willingness to carry more than was strictly necessary, just in case. That is not a divine quality. That is a deeply human one. These are 8 half-gods from 8 traditions. Gilgamesh, who was 2/3 divine, and still got distracted by a serpent at the exact wrong moment. Heracles, who completed 12 impossible labors as penance for a madness a goddess sent him. Achilles, who chose glory over a long life and got exactly what he asked for. Arjuna, who stopped in the middle of a battlefield and asked why, and produced the Bhagavad Gita. Perseus, who started with nothing and accumulated everything he needed. Chulainn, who died tied to a standing stone and whose enemies waited for a bird to confirm it. Maui, who fished up islands and slowed the sun and died trying to make humans immortal. Hanuman, who carried an entire mountain rather than risk being wrong about an herb. Every one of them is half divine, and every one of them fails in a completely human way. Gilgamesh gets distracted. Achilles makes a choice he cannot take back. Arjuna has a crisis of conscience. Perseus gets lucky at the right moment. Chulainn is tricked. Maui laughs at the wrong moment. Hanuman does not know which herb. The divine half gives them the power to do things no human could do. The human half is why their stories are worth telling. Because the human half is the part that makes mistakes, that loves people who die, that chooses glory over safety, that sits down in a chariot before a battle and asks, does this actually matter? The gods never ask that question, only the half-gods do.